let's go live to Caracas, Venezuela, where the President of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodríguez, is offering statements in the framework of the World Anti-Fascist Congress being held from September 10th to 11th in the country. Let's listen.
Recommend me books, and also about things I like the most. It is to recommend to the people that unify us. And I believe it's very important to propose you this novel of Fabiano Masilvi, The Angel of Munich, that tells in a detective way all that is surrounding the murder of the niece and lover of Adolf Hitler, but it represents perfectly that Germany pre-fascism. And although I haven't read it, I invite you to look for this book that I'm going to show you right now. Instructions to Become a Fascist by Michela Borgia. And I propose you to read this together. This is a way to express our affection, our solidarity, and receive throughout Hague the warmest welcome to this homeland of the liberator, Simon Bolivar, and the homeland of our commander, Hugo Chavez. Rander surprised me with this title of conference about psychological war. Must be that I'm a psychiatrist and Venezuela has been in a war permanent against the imperialism. What I want to share with you today is denominated Fascism and Silent Spiral. Why? First of all, I think that we must, before getting into some psychological issues, since the area of mental health and elements of neo-fascism and cyber-fascism and the use of social media to spread hate, we need to start from some truth of Perugullo. First, fascism is nothing else but a political expression of a crisis in capitalism, an economic cause when elites seem to be at risk in front of the emergence of social movements that fight inequity situations and economic crisis. Fascism emerged as last resort used by oligarchies of these countries. This is something that should have been called deceivement. Second, as Arthur Miller said, after the Second World War, all of the governments of extreme right, and with a neo-fascism issues have counted on the support of the North American governments of the United States. Not a single one hasn't been encouraged by the governments of the United States. Then this is the reason why in the United States there's no coup d'etat, because there's no embassy of the United States in this country. Although the political scenario could suggest this due to the crises that have been taking place there due to the hatred that social media spread. Could be easy to identify fascism these days if fascism had the communicational approaches that it had during the 90s, during the 40s. Look what the extreme right of Spain expressed. I will save Spain from Marxism, no matter what it takes. I wouldn't care about killing half of Spain if that is the price to pay to pacify it. Francisco Franco. I don't understand why they didn't give him the Nobel Prize of Peace if they gave it to Barack Obama. But what he was given was North American based and Spanish territory, and was endowed with this way was easy to identify fascism because it was not only the product of a specific situation economically and socially in the post-war Europe, but also comes from a psychological mechanism, a mass psychological mechanism. I don't know if you know this. This is the first article in which Sigmund Freud starts to work. An element that simply surprised him in his first works in the 1907, Freud started to work in the definition of what after we knew after the psychic apparatus, that interchange of psychological forces that determine personality. And Freud pointed out that the human being was um, determined by just a main principle, the principle of pleasure. And he was not only talking about the erotic element, but the look for satisfaction of the needs, no matter where they were. Laugh if your mother comes, eat if you're hungry, go to these places that uh, don't make you feel uncomfortable. And during the two first decades of the 20th century, Freud was defending that all human beings were commanded by the principle of pleasure. But after the First World War and the emergence of a new way of addressing politics, the fascist movements in Germany and west of Europe, and also in Italy and Spain, so that Freud would say not only there have there has to be in a human being the principle of pleasure, but also other principles equally powerful, constantly against the pleasure uh, principle, which was called principle of destruction or death. And this is the picture of the original article by Freud in 1921. And from 1921 to 1925, Freud was pointing out that the human being also has a principle of self-destruction and destructions, and there come wars, aggressions, and homicides. Pay attention to this, because from the principle of destruction that all human beings have, Freud points out that if this principle is liberated from a social point of view, movements uh, against the preservation of the human being can arise. How many millions of deaths to caused the invasions of the army of the United States in the whole planet, and the civil war of Spain, which was a war determined by the fascism at that time. And pay attention to the principle of destruction, because since it's a powerful mental mechanism, is what the owners of the war resorts to. They are the owners of the social media, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk, and we're fighting the three of them in this the homeland of Bolivar and Chavez. They use precisely this emergence of the principle of destruction through handling particularly their social media, so that men become and wolves, men for destruction and women for hatred, lies, lack of compassion, lack of solidarity. That's the main element they use, and causes that people behave as zombies. And for example, the neighbor that you have known for years, for the these actions of the social media becomes an enemy to destroy. Of course, fascism has psychological elements that are very important. I know that you have just had lunch, so I'm not gonna get into Honduras to talk about these psychological elements that encompass the fascist ideology. There's another fundamental element that goes beyond the economic issue, is that fascism resources to mental control mechanism, which is propaganda that has always been used. First, uh, the first element is that all human beings have inside instincts that are far away of this part of the brain that I have exposed because I'm old, which is the neocortex. After this part of the head is the new the neocortex, where emotions and love and rational thinking is. But behind that, we have um, instances that are canalized by fascist ideology. Another element is fear and repression. There's always someone taking what's yours from you, although you don't have it. And that's a fundamental characteristic of the media, medium classes, which are always called for the power to have, to defend what they don't have, but what they want to have. In the case of Nazi Germany, Jewish and communists. In the case of Spain, communists. And in the case of the United States, also communist, Muslim, Latin Americans, all that is different from the white supremacy. Then a mechanism of alienation and hierarchization. An element was identified through a entirely current of hierarchy. Another fundamental element of fascism emergence is that there's always a threat. At the beginnings of the Bolivarian Revolution, the sectors that rapidly emerged as fascist in the Chavez Venezuela, the revolutionary Venezuela, that came not to do other thing but correct the inequity, economical, social, the Venezuela, the end of the 20th century. But what they say was mostly that Chavez is going to take your car, your house from you. But if you don't have a car, what car are they going to take from you? After they said Chavez is going to take your children from you, the threat that something that is coming is going to interrupt with your tranquility. And that is happening constantly. Of course, we are in a superior level of aggression against the Bolivarian Revolution because now there's a real threat for humanity here, which is social media, a real danger for the existence of men and women as free human beings. What is being treated here is a threat for slavery in dystopic terms as presented in the novel Fahrenheit 451. In the case of the Bolivarian Revolution, not a single day has happened that these elements of extreme right and fascism spread hate. Not only a single day, they have abandoned this tendency. And finally, they have been less successful in this, in the case of Venezuela, is the construction of collective identities. All of this against, in the case of Venezuela, the middle class, which was not favored by the Bolivarian Revolution, and for Maduro, it's a class that has been protected for Maduro since it's one of the main victims of the economic blockade and economic sanctions imposed by them. is some kind of collective suicide. They applaud the things that hurt them. And this is applied through the principle of self destruction described by Freud. This is a very famous picture that expressed the resistance. I think this happened in Hamburg, Germany. Hitler was inaugurating a port in Hamburg, and all of them were uh, performing the Nazi greeting, but a man. But always that this happens, at least one that raises his voice against fascism, humanity has an opportunity. And that is why I feel so pleased that these important people gathered here to discuss about fascism. Now, what is the danger we're fighting in a moment like this we're living? The danger we're facing is that these three owners of social media that try to become the owners of the planet and the planet's economy, and we have to say it like this: Venezuela is today the center of the fight against fascism in the world. We didn't choose it, chose it. We didn't look for it. Well, this is a World Congress Against Fascism and a similar expression. We will.
We were all live to Caracas, Venezuela, where the President of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodríguez, offers statements in the framework of the World Anti-Fascist Congress, which is being held from September 10th to 11th in the country. During his statements, Rodríguez welcomed all participants to the great homeland of Simón Bolívar and referred to the psychological war Venezuela has been subjected to in the past weeks. For the high official, fascism is a political expression of the crisis suffered by capitalism, and also he recalled that after World War II, neo-fascism has been supported by the US and its Western allies, and they are the main promoters of this archaic political current until today. Rodríguez also assured fascism is manifested today in social media and space that allows the spread of hatred with the complicity of Western powers, who are the owners of the biggest technological and media emporiums. Fear and repression are two fundamental characteristics of the working class living under neo-fascist policies, a reality that Venezuela is fighting against for it never to settle in the country despite the ultra-right's attempts. Let's recall that in Venezuela, the World Anti-Fascist Congress is being held from September 10th to 11th. A conference that gathers more than 200 delegates from 95 countries around the world in support of the fight against imperialism, colonialism, and fascism. This is all for the moment. Stay tuned with From the South.